2-1. Okay, we're back.
Yeah, we hope to be back on there. Yeah, we've been going weeks and weeks and weeks of essentially unlimited time where Zoom decided not to pull the plug on us, and then this time they just gave us a half an hour to where we go, wait, so there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's probably because we didn't sacrifice a virgin goat or something. I don't know what the criteria are on that.
Probably.
But the interesting thing about looking at all of these issues of creationism, I try to triage things on a methods issue to look to see how things connect up. And I'm not alone in doing this kind of thing. The National Center for Science Education trended in exactly the same direction I did when they started into the fact of people they were encountering in the creationism community that were showing up in the network that supports the climate science denialists, and that there was connections with the Republican Party and all of that. And so it's no coincidence
Jim
for me
Inhofe
that Jay Sekulow, Pat Robertson's creationist arm, is the lawyer to President Trump. I mean, these things have consequences. You're seeing a network of people who come from an anti-evolution, hyper-conservative structure that they want to restore America to its air quotes biblical roots. There's material that links up with David Barton, the pseudo-historian. You've got material with Rosas Rushduni and Kent Hovind in the hyper-conservative American government has no right to tax anybody network.
Taxation is theft.
Yeah, and so and not only that, you even have this. There's another fasten your seatbelt moment, Buzko, is that there is a small but not uninfluential body of geocentrists who play a part in the anti-evolution movement. People who doubt that the Earth revolves around the sun.
Yeah.
That the guy Ellwanger was part of a conservative Roman Catholic bunch back in the 1980s that are to this day geocentrists on biblical grounds. He was the guy that actually penned the anti-evolution legislation that made it to the Supreme Court, the one that Tennessee and Arkansas and all these others drew on. That was his model legislation. And then we move over to Kansas when the air quotes intelligent design movement was trying to revamp the Kansas educational system in 1999. The one who actually wrote the standards was Tom Willis, who is a geocentrist. So the idea that even something as screwball as geocentrism is actually still filtering through the network as to all these connections. And too many of the creationists don't compare notes much. We notice this over and over again of the smorgasborder types who will take a little bit of creationism here and a little bit of creationism here. So they'll be bringing you a little bit of Michael Behe and a little bit of Bill Dembski and then a little bit of Dwayne Gish and a little bit of Kent Hovind. And you're going, whoa.
RJ, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the same kind of for people who brought us because in Louisiana, we had our own push for young Earth creationism with the 2008 Louisiana Science Education Act signed into law by Bobby Jindal, which is still on the books to this day.
And to this day,
what the heck?
the intelligent design defenders of it say it isn't about creationism in that, but when you actually look at what the homeschools and the various charter schools are actually doing, a proportion of them are pulling out full-blown creationism in their curricula. The Abeka books and I can't remember what some of the other ones in there.
Homeschooling is it's the Answers in Genesis crowd loves the homeschoolers.
Oh yeah. And the head, I think his name is Ferris. We mention him in the new book. We have a lot of things in the new book.
We do have a lot of things.
Ferris, who is the head of the hyper-conservative branch of homeschooling, one of his associates is now in the Justice Department under the Trump administration. There's a revolving door of dumb that's going on in here. And of course, the Earth creationists that think that the pyramids were built as Joseph
for evolution. I would stand up there in a soapbox at the Central Park and preach to people that evolution is the real faith. But I don't do that. So why is there a motivation for people to push wacko ideas? And I mean, you can list them endlessly, these kind of conspiracy theories. And I think if we want to basically stem wacko ideas, creation isn't in it, but others as well. We need to understand what is the motivation for people to go out there and talk BS, talk bullshit in that level. There is a reason for this. These people, I think, personally, a large percentile of people who go out there and talk this nonsense know they talk nonsense.
Oh, I'll disagree.
So I
with
want
you.
to know what's the motivation for them to lie that bad.
Here's again, we've got some, there's some actual technical literature that's been done on these subjects about the motivations. There is a connection between the creationist mindset and conspiratorial thinking, of teleological thinking, so that you have a certain kind of mind that ends up being in these modalities. Now, it doesn't necessarily end up in a creationist perspective. If they were raised in, say, 1930 Russia, they could easily have ended up a Lysenko backer in their political frame. But the point is that people have a personality that has an object of desire that can override sections of their brain. I come up with, I call them the Tortucan minds. It's a word that hasn't caught on yet, Latin for turtle, but it's to refer to people that have effectively an impenetrable mind shell. And my poster children here are Philip Johnson, who just recently died. One of the big
Johnson
avatars
died?
of the Philip Johnson. Yeah, he finally croaked.
Really?
Yeah,
What?
there's been you on it. Yeah, I had to adjust the thing. He just died just last year.
Oh
late
my
last
goodness! I had no idea.
Year. He had a stroke quite a few years earlier, so he was sort of out of a lot of the picture for quite some time.
Wow.
But anyway, the guy got into Harvard University when he was 16. He couldn't have been a stupid person, and yet when you read his material, he sure is doing a good imitation of a stupid person. And so the thing is that you have a mindset that starts disconnecting the fact-checking, cross-checking network. So we finally boiled it down to 4 primary things that we're seeing in people who believe things that aren't true, and creationists are an example of that. Anti-vaxxers will be another, Holocaust deniers. There's a bunch of different pieces, but the mentality is the same. 1, they're really easily addicted to secondary sources that they don't fact check. They can rely on them effortlessly. The vast majority of anti-evolutionists, as in 95%, I'm measuring this, don't even bother with primary sources. They're just repeating a trope that they get. The core group, the number 2 problem, is the core group that they rely on is extremely narrow. I mentioned that there were only 60 anti-evolutionists who were the main fact claimants. In anti-vaxxer land, it's probably no more than a handful of people that are involved. You find the same thing going on with flat Earth mythology. You can trace them back in genealogies of stupid to core groups, and they're very, very small compared to the number of followers. Now, the other 2 are getting into cognitive issues. One is one that I isolated from the creationism case, which is they literally can't conceptualize what I call the map of time, which is, what do you think happened? This happened, then this happened, then this happened kind of reasoning. I literally know of no counterexample anywhere in the entire anti-evolution literature of anybody getting to the point of working out what they think happened. We go into gruesome detail in the new book on Andrew Snelling and Kurt Wise and all the rest, trying with this cartoon version of catastrophic plate tectonics, and that they have a model that there was going to be a big flood and there were things happening, floating forests and fountains of the deep and continents shifting around and flash freezing mastodons. They've got pieces, but they can never quite translate it into, well, if you go here, you would see this, and if you were over here, you would be seeing this, which is what you get in the standard literature when you're dealing with paleogeology, ecology. When you look at the integrating things that are being done in the technical papers, working out what climate systems were going on during the Mesozoic, there's an interconnectivity that never happens anywhere in the anti-evolution movement. And you would find that almost the same thing is happening with the anti-vaxxers, with flat earthers, with moon landing hoax people, that they have a cartoon version of what they want, but they can't actually generate a finished one. Then we get to the 4th one, the kicker. What evidence would change their mind? And I would contend that the core problem that is universal across all this boundary is they can't even imagine evidence to change their mind. Why? Because the object of desire overwhelms themselves So they find ways to maneuver around problems, never, ever, ever coming with ways to accept evidence. And I came as a litmus test here, the transitional form example, that I literally know of no instance where an anti-evolutionist ever explains what a fossil would need to look like that they would accept as a transitional, other than the cartoon of the crocodile or something of that ilk. You get things at that level.
Are you familiar with the crocodile?
Cow's udder on the back end, that kind of
They
stuff.
match what it looks like, yeah.
Yeah, but when you and so I use I love using examples. My favorite go-to, if you're not aware, I'll do a shameless plug for my book that I wrote, Evolution Slam Dunk, which is on the reptile mammal transition, which was an undercovered subject matter in the discussion. It pops up occasionally here and there. Almost all the work on it is in collegiate level technical books and journals they're not funky, they're not popular like the dinosaurs. But the therapsids that lead to mammals are amazing, and unlike all these other macroevolution cases, have a blatant example of a predicted transitional form, which are the double-jawed probengnathids and diarthrognathids that Robert Broom predicted down to the bloody muscle attachments back in 1912. And so they are my slam dunk case of where there's literally no gaps. It's a smooth, incremental, slow as molasses transition over 100 million years. And now with that paleogenomics, where they were recreating the teeth, I think, oh God, I can't think whether it starts with an M. I've forgotten the name of the people that had done all this stuff. There's 2 or 3 names that I keep on forgetting in my brain. But anyway, the technical work that was done on this just a couple years ago, some of the tooth forms they recreated were ones that were only known from extinct therapsids. This, I think I call them the T2 form in the thing because it's got like Trotylophontid. There are too many names that sound similar, so I put clues in to make it easier for people to tell things apart.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. That's kind of how I feel about a lot of like phylogenetics. Once you start getting down like past the family level, there are a lot of names in kind of the same groups that all look about the same.
It's an indexer's nightmare, because one bloody letter difference and you're in one group of ant or you're in a vertebrate. And, it's absolutely terrible, but you find that out in constructing the indexes and all the other stuff. So the thing is that this inability to conceptualize evidence to change their mind, that's the core defensive trench. Therefore, what I've been doing in my source methods approach is to try to wean people onto asking the right questions. So when I am in debates with creationists on Twitter, and anybody that follows me on Twitter will know what an entertaining task that can be.
Oh man, Buzzgo, you might, if you don't have a Twitter, you probably should get one.
I'll tell you, it's a useful platform for a variety of reasons. There's most of the people that I follow, I follow about 500 people.
Go ahead.
I'll tell you why. It's because I'm able to get a network of scientists who are often cutting people in the thing, and they put their latest posts up, and that speeds up the ability for me. I'm just a lowly schlub here in Spokane who cannot possibly read every one of the thousands of technical journals. It's physically impossible to do. I hit PNAS and Science and Nature every week, but I rely upon my spider tendril of connections, mainly on Twitter, to keep me attuned to the incoming field of the cutting edge literature. And so you can get some of it because you'll get summary things at Nature and Science that will be talking about other fields. But everything that I can use to speed up that process to keep ahead of the data curve. By the way, another term I wanted to bring up that connects up to the motivation issue is I borrowed an old term from Bismarck, Kulturkampf, which was referring to his war with the parochial Catholic educational system when he was making the German Empire and he wanted to subordinate them to the national education system so Germany can modernize. And the word perfectly suited what I was seeing in the creationist motivation department. Is they're fighting a culture war. They have a struggle that they're fighting for people's souls, that they don't want the United States to become separated from God, and therefore we're imperiled to damnation. Like Noah, there's going to be fire and brimstone and terrible things that will happen if not. And so that's part of the driver of why your creationist is so adamant that they need to have everybody go along with this, because it's not just whether or not sauropod vertebrae have pluricells in them, but whether or not you're going to accept that we are specially created and that you have to submit yourself to Jesus and so forth. So there's a driver that is non-negotiable for them. This is their entire worldview. And
let's put it right there. It goes very much about themselves. There's a strong egocentric element to that. It is about man is the center of evolution. The man is the center of creation in this situation. So man is the crown of creation. The man is equal to God, is in the image of God. And I am man. Therefore, I'm in the center of the universe. I'm so important. And now, as you just mentioned, they exclude facts. They make an entire scaffold of fake facts and crosscuts to justify the part. And I've seen this with a disease I've encountered 3 times in my life. That's delusional schizophrenia. Mm. The first person I met, he believed that a obscure gang, the Tennessee gang, was after him, and he thought that the road signs were messages of the Tennessee gang to tell him something. Mm. And there was no way to explain that this road sign has been on this road for many years, even before he was born.
Yeah, his brain just won't process that information.
And of course, the classic part also, radio broadcast messages, whether it is a music DJ or a show anchorman sends private messages to that.
Secret codes in the Beatles songs, that kind of thing.
Classic. There's no way to go through that wall of denial. That person has worked it all out, and he will always find an answer on the spot why your concept of reality is wrong.
And it's not restricted to a particular religion. There are Hindus who have been browbeating historians over there to get their mythology into the school books that where they are denying certain archaeological evidence that's competing with the Hindu worldview.
Go ahead.
What I'm saying is, it is not a religious issue. It is a psychiatric issue. So classic, the person takes himself or herself very important, is in the center of all their world, and the entire truth gets bent into a delusion that in itself works well. And that's what I observe in not only conspiracy theorists, but also people that have a fundamentalist religion, and also in some people in political lines like communists. I'm so old that I risk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. These are very similar.
And fascists on the other side. So there is this kind of part of group schizophrenia happening in the sense of a delusional attitude. And then there's other people who have connected maybe with this certain anger that they hate the system, whatever the system is. And they're related to people who are what you call trolls on the internet. They always try to provoke you. They always try to have an opposing opinion about you. And they always pop you. Or people show up as hecklers in shows, whether it's a comedy or a discussion or anything.
They're suddenly the center of attention.
Yep.
And so there's a narcissism there. Who can we think of as a narcissist who's in a position of power?
Yeah, you can think of 1 or 2 of them. I can't think of more than
or a
one.
whole cabinet, you know.
Yeah,
but you get the point. You get the point. So there is actually more on that line and understanding, and people who exploit this politically, who then actually try to expand that schizophrenia or that narcissism on their political agenda, because of course that's the way to get into power.
Popularize my Tortugan word, because it's a handy little placeholder for that you can say that any North Korea is a Tortugan regime. You have people in the current Trump administration who are Tortugans. They're people who are never going to change their mind. That it can appeal to ideologues. Steve Miller, I would think, would be a perfectly classic example of that. You've got, and then you have that layer of secondary sycophants that circulate around that. And you find the same phenomenon in creationism where there's hot debates. For example, does Eric Hovind, the son of Kent Hovind, actually believe what he says, or is he just in it for money?
That's a good question.
Whereas I contend, no, he's a Tortugan. So he believes everything he actually says.
Well, there's a point where I think it gets interesting. When you talk about politicians or about people that go to public media, which ones of those people actually believe what they say, basically have this delusion, exploit it, and use that vehicle to put their political agenda on whatever you want to say. So I think there's discrepancy between the two, and it's quite interesting to find out who that is.
A good analog here would be spiritualism, because we know that an awful lot of spiritualists are perfectly honest people in the sense that they really believe all the things they do. But there's also quite a subculture of craven spiritualists who know full well that what they're doing is bullshit, but rationalize it anyway. And well, we could theoretically conduct brain scans. You know, we could find out, what's going on in their amygdala and their anterior cingulate cortex. The anterior cingulate cortex is one of the brain areas that I love. This one. It's one of my favorite brain systems. Primates developed it as a social conflict resolution system, and it still performs that role. But we further lit up like a Christmas tree during self-deception. And so there are all these little science areas. I keep track of those issues. I keep track of origin of life issues and and I have some litmus test tags, multicellularity, mitochondria, endosymbiosis. Those are all terms that I'm constantly keeping track of. Jump in, Jackson.
I forgot. I was thinking. You're right. It is hectic. We're always going off on different tangents and things. I just had a thought about the Twitter thing, and I was thinking about why you should have a Twitter, because there are lots of really neat people on there, like Matthew Herron, who I believe you're probably aware of his work. He does lots of stuff on multicellularity, especially in the vulva scenes. Actually, interestingly, Frederick Leliert, however you pronounce his name, he did a really cool paper on the evolution of green algae several years ago. Anyway, he just started following me the other day, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, there are lots of interesting people out there.
It's a caustic environment in some ways, but remember, I go into the lion's den. I really started to get active on Twitter because I started bumping into a small group of really delicious Twitterists who go around collecting stupid and then retweeting it so people can see the stupid. So there's Take That Science and Take That Darwin, that their entire reason online is to scavenge around through that network of dumb and pick up examples of, here is a dumb thing that they just said, and they would be retweeting it. So suddenly I had access to a vast network of people who were finding the stupid for me. And then I could decide on a triage basis, can I be of value in jumping in here and putting my 2 cents in? So it's a matter of a calculated use of the form. I call it Twitter haiku. I had to come out. This was before the character's length increased to 280.
RJ likes neologisms.
Yeah, I love Neil. Well, I'm a Stephen Jay Gould type. You know, Gould was coining new terms all the time, spandrels and all that. Matter of fact, he has a whole bunch of terms that are just tongue twister messes, and they never caught on. But spandrel and punctuated equilibrium are some of my favorites because they're practical and useful. Digression. Here's my pocket definition of religion: a neotenous spandrel that is sustained as a scorched earth defense.
Well, what I'm trying to go is in this entire discussion of evolution or reverse creationism. I see you spend considerable time hunting down the negative, the evil, the dumb. You collect dumb. I'm more interested in those people that are in decisive position, decision takers that are not stupid. I'm more interested to actually find the attention and find a gateway to people who make decisions and who have a role as opinion leaders.
Yeah.
And if they're not opinion leaders, at least people are interested in what I say for their own benefit. Because at the end, the matter is all who is interested in you, who is listening to you, and who is paying you, who is paying money that you can do research and find facts. The big danger that we have is that dumb takes over and we go into idiocracy.
Yeah, and this is serious shit. We can afford that. Shit.
And I tell my students, if you want to make America great again, you have to think when America was great, is when we were leading in technology and science. Now, if you take science away, cut down budget for science, and you dumb down and go down onto a wacky pseudoscience level, you will not make America great again. you will make us being conquered by whoever, the North Koreans or by Russians or by Chinese eventually. So actually, we will dumb us out of the competition if you go that line. So point is for us, important is those people who actually appreciate what we do. So if we do a agenda on evolution, what is it worth for those people who are interested in us?
Well,
one of the very interesting parts for me is, as I mentioned, stock market is one of the interesting parts. Then research in medicine is an interesting part. Environment is an interesting part. So there are people who are interested in that, not just because they're nice people, because they also make money on it.
And that's the idea of can you marshal market forces to bring that ability into play, but instead of it being for stupid and venal things, it's in service of correct, worthwhile goals.
Well, I would say that's exactly what we do with my YouTube channel, is because we put videos together where we in essence marshal all the facts and in essence just summarize a dense concept. Like we just did a couple of weeks ago a video on climate change. We talked about how global warming is in fact a thing. Here are the ways we can know that it is a thing. And so I think YouTube is very good for that, because it's a good way to dispense to a large audience.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost anything. That it's a thing that's an open access. Of course, you're also competing with the twaddleists. I mean, an average flat Earth video has 30,000 views.
And you throw your pearls in front of the swines and dogs so they turn around and bite you.
Well, that's why you need to have a thick skin.
Well, here's the danger with public science that is for free. It is undervalued and it's a competition with stupid.
That's true, yeah.
Global warming. I just started my new course of people and plants and society. And I tell my students, who is most interested in details of effects of climate change in the next 10, 20 years? Agricultural corporations.
Sure.
Companies that buy a huge amount of real estate. A lot of farmers lose their land. They don't own the land anymore. It's owned by great corporations. I'm not going to go any names, but you probably have an idea who that is. They're not always agricultural companies. They're not always companies that are directly involved in agriculture. They're sometimes involved in...
Yeah, it's also the too many eggs in one basket problem.
But you see, there are some people interested in knowing which area is going to go dry, which areas are going to go wet, which areas are going to go underwater. Those people are very interested in hearing about concepts of global climate change. Of course, they will make money on the cost of the people who are too stupid to figure out, on the people who don't listen. So if Baba Douchebag is buying real estate in New Orleans, overpriced, sold by a corporation, you know that land is going to go in the water, and they use that money to buy land somewhere up north where it's drier, he's losing, they're winning. So which side are you playing with? Are you going to burn your fingers off trying to tell the people like the Baba Douchebag about global warming, and he says, well, I don't know, the other people say the opposite, what should I believe? Or are you going to talk to people who are appreciating what you can predict and who are going to pay your future? So maybe we shouldn't go public science. Maybe we should do the opposite. Maybe we should go cryptic. We should write the Illuminati code on something
yes,
only to
the secret cult to know of the truth,
and let the crowd follow populist bullshit.
Yeah, that's the inevitable problem. I see we're down to below 9 minutes. They're going to be pulling our plug on it. Well, I think we got enough of the stuff out. That this is really an important issue about how you convey information. And I put my Tortugan model in play, that there are some people that may be politically conservative, for example, but they're not really a Tortugan mind. They're actually open to evidence. And there was an example of a Republican who had been swallowing the party line about climate change, and he'd be repeating stuff that he heard from the Heartland Institute. And then came the dreaded day when he decided to fact check it. And that meant that he was not a Tortugan. He was actually curious, and he went out and discovered, oh shit, this is all wrong. And he actually changed his mind on that. So what in part we have to do in terms of politics is we need to detect Tortugans before they get in power. So we need to have some basic
Before
questions.
they get access
Reporters
to the
need
nuclear
be able to
launch
ask
codes.
questions. Yeah, it's like the real basics here. How old do you think the Earth is? Do you accept that all life is related by common descent? Do you accept the Earth revolves around the sun? Let's just get some basics out of the way. And if you can't even get past those hurdles, excuse me, but you have no business being in government. And the problem is we have people in government, in state houses, in Congress, as governors, as cabinet officials, and maybe presidents, who have absolutely no ability to process information reliably. And it shows. And we've reached the stage now at a tipping point where we have the science available, we have the knowledge, we have the technology, but if we can't marshal the people in defense of that, we're going to go fall down, go boom. And excuse me, I don't want to go the way of the Romans or the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany or any of these other places that try to substitute political mandates to try to say what is correct and incorrect science. No, there's just the science. You can either prove it or you can't, and that we have to build off of that. Okay, we're down to about 7 minutes to go. I hope some people got the stuff on that. You can see how far-ranging our conversations can go, Buzzgo.
Yeah, sometimes we end up talking about like a tarot card. Actually, before RJ, sometimes we end up talking about tarot card games and things like that. And we're not going to get him on this. We're not going to get
motion pictures. I'm a science fiction buff. I'm a historian of a lot of different things, and so I can go geek alert at a moment's notice and go veering off onto tangents and all the rest. But I'm if there's one thing I do claim to be, I'm curious, and I'm a devout methodologist. In other words, it's not just believing things, it's how do you prove it? How did you come to this? Did you be careful to make sure you're not believing stupid shit? And so as an old fart, I've gradually learned the techniques over time of applying the lessons that I learned back in college. Never confuse a primary with a secondary source. Don't take anything on faith, even from people that especially from people that you're excessively agreeing with. That's why we're so adamant about putting linkages to the material so people can check up on their own. You don't take our word for it. You don't need to take our word for it. We don't want you to take our word for it.
And here I thought everyone took what I said as gospel truth.
Oh, darn it all. Well, we can slip the book of Jackson in between Leviticus and Deuteronomy, I think.
Yeah, possibly. Oh, man. Yeah. Thank you for coming on. Thank you very much.
Yes, I hope you found your experience not annoying, and let everybody know in your network about what we kind of do here. Jackson, you have way more viewership than I do. I'm down in the basement, of about 150 or 200 people every week in that, but we do what we do. And
thank you for having me.
Yes, and the book is coming. It should be out, if not by the end of this month, early February. Volume 1 of The Rocks Were There, and then we'll be working on Volume 2. And it would be like a delightful thing filled with science and more incredibly stupid things. Just when you think creationists can't get stupider, you discover, oh, yes, they can.
And I would like to get you on my channel at some point to talk more about like plant development and that kind of stuff, because I think all that's...
It's an immense subject, fabulously interesting. I've learned so much just from writing this book with Jackson, because he's way ahead of me on an awful lot of systematic areas, and I'm going, ooh, wow, that's neat.
My favorite, I have to say, of the 4 tests, I think my favorite was the second one, because like half of it was just which clade does this group go in, and I was like, oh, this is easy.
Yeah, that's a bit of trivia, yes, yeah.
I mean, in a general sense, sure.
You're in that secondary joint happened quite slow, still not completely finished. So secondary joint in mammals actually has its traces in real today existing mammals. So that piece of ligament that's going from the lower jaw up is still existing. It just goes away later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They found out in just regarding dinosaurs that a particular bone that they had it turns out it's just present embryonically in birds, just for a fraction of a bit.
Oh, yeah.
This happens all the time.
Eye thing. Yeah. We talked about that in a video. We did a whole video on the evolution of early birds, and it's just this little. It becomes part of the eye. It's like there's like a separate bone or whatever, and it just becomes part of the little, like eye or nasal.
Every organism is the sum total of all of its heritage, going back to whatever ancestors it has. And so it's the fascinating part of all the science to be able to figure out what's in our basement and why it is the way it is.
And why does it have cobwebs all over it?
Yeah, get out the blower, Swiffer it. And the fact is that I feel like a kid in a candy store, in that so much knowledge has accumulated. You can almost draw a dividing line between pre-homeobox and post-homeobox 1990s as to, like, it's understandable that, like, nobody was making sense out of this really because they were missing really important pieces.
Okay, yes. The homeobox, to some degree, is certainly part. I mean, it was discovered in Basel, the Antinopedia gene.
Yeah.
Before I started as a student, actually was all over when I started student. The Antinopedia was all over, and at that time I didn't quite understand what it meant because I was too young and too fresh to biology to understand that.
Yeah.
For today, that snow from yesterday, and we have gone way beyond that. We understand how these transcription factors actually operate much better, and how they now interact with other proteins, how the nations change their function. This part is very interesting for me, and I think that's the key part. Maybe we shouldn't bother too much about wackos and people who have wacky ideas out there. Maybe we should simply see what can we do that is productive, that's helpful, and develop that knowledge for those who appreciate it. And
absolutely, and that's why we try to
live in a fake world. Let them live in their fake world, and I'm sure if we focus on productivity, we will find people who appreciate what we do. And maybe
I think every person that I've ever bumped into in the science departments has people that they have regarded as wonderful mentors and inspirations that just get them jump started. Now, as for dealing with the wackos, that's what people like me are for, because we relish it. This is
happy to delegate that to you.
For us.
Yeah,
I'm happy to delegate dealing with wackos to you. I'm not very good at this.
When I was
minute to go, we're almost to say bye-bye.
Yeah, when I was at LSU Baton Rouge, I was working for Dr. Jake Esselstyn, and Answers Genesis wrote a short piece about him, and I showed it to him. He just kind of laughed at it, and so.
I don't expect scientists to have to deal with. They shouldn't. They should be doing the damn science. Leave some of that to us. But then draw upon us to be able to say, who's this wacko? Well, know about the wackos, and we can fill you in so that you can deal with it better. We're under a minute. We're about ready to say bye-bye. See you all next